Okay, so the Words of Mormon. And so, what is the Words of Mormon? Let's just get a little bit of this is another kind of one of those historical videos where we just kind of go through some details here. And so I'm just kind of abbreviating what we learn here from Come Follow Me, but essentially just to kind of paint the picture, we've got Mormon, who is the master abridger of the Book of Mormon. And he is going through the large plates of Mormon, and he is just abridging. He's reading these records and he's condensing them in. We have those famous verses that say, if I can't even tell you like 100th part of the things that I would like to, but he is trying to pull out what he feels is most beneficial for us. And that's how we have the majority of the Book of Mormon coming from the hand of Mormon as he's abridging the records. So as he's abridging, he discovers these small plates, which is the record of 1st Nephi, 2nd Nephi, Jacob. So he discovers these small plates, and that is when he kind of seeks an understanding of what these are, and then he is commanded by God to abridge that record. And he's confused by this directive because the history of the small plates is similar to the history of the large plates, but the small plates contain more of a spiritual record of the inhabitants of the people. And so he's a little confused by this, but he does it because the Lord commands. And Mormon has learned in his life that when the Lord commands, you do something. And so the Words of Mormon, this is a bridge between both of the large plates and the small plates. So this brings us to an end of the small plates and a beginning of the large plates. And so what we kind of, this goes back to the story of Martin Harris and Joseph Smith. So I think often this is something that kind of became more real to me as Laura and I were studying and preparing for these videos and going through Come Follow Me. So the small plates, which is the first chunk of the Book of Mormon. So this first chunk of the Book of Mormon, this actually was the last thing that Joseph Smith translated. When Joseph Smith picked up the plates and started translating, he started in what we refer to as the Book of Lehi, and he gets 116 pages. And then we know the experience where Martin Harris asks if he can take these records to his family. He's providing a lot of the financial well-being for the plates. And so Martin Harris essentially takes them, loses them, and then Joseph Smith and Martin Harris cease to translate the plates. And for a season, there's no translation. And there's this repentance and there's this restitution period. And when Joseph Smith begins to translate again, he starts right here from Mosiah all the way to Moroni. So that's kind of what we see as the translation. And then when he finishes that, he goes back and translates the 1st Nephi, 2nd Nephi, Jacob.
To get us up to that.
So to get us up to that. So the Words of Mormon is a bridge between those two records.
And so, yeah, we were kind of talking about what we could take away from this.
Yeah, there's not like a question. There's not like a question that says, what is,
So what we could take away from it, and we came up with, Peter pointed out these 2 verses that were actually really powerful. The first one is in 1st Nephi 9:5. And this is talking about Nephi and what he just talked about. He says, "Wherefore the Lord hath commanded me to make these plates for a wise purpose in him, which purpose I know not." And then in 6, I like this, it says, "But the Lord knoweth all things from the beginning. Wherefore he prepareth the way to accomplish all his works." And so Nephi didn't know why he was making those plates, but the Lord did. And then if you go to Words of Mormon, verse 7, it says, "And I do this for a wise purpose. For thus it whispereth me, according to the workings of the Spirit of the Lord which is in me. And now I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things which are to come. Wherefore he worketh in me to do according to his will." And so basically both of these prophets are saying the same thing. They were doing something they were commanded to do without knowing why. But the Lord knew why. And so we just kind of were chit-chatting a little bit about experiences in our lives of times when maybe we have heeded the promptings of the Spirit or done something that we didn't know why, but we followed the Spirit, followed the guidance of the Lord, and something had come of it. And so one of my biggest ones, Peter, I had to do my part in sharing here. So Peter asked me to share this, but before I met Peter, when I was at college, I actually I was engaged to another guy. He asked me to marry him, and like the situation, everything was perfect. Like I had flown out to Minnesota to meet his family. He was, just far along in school, getting ready to graduate, and everything seemed perfect. But so he proposed to me, but I had never in my life experienced the stupor of thought that they talk about in the scriptures. But I had a stupor of thought. I won't go through details, but like I was engaged for just a little bit, and I couldn't. There was something telling me no. As right as it seemed, I couldn't get the feeling. The Spirit just kept telling me, this is not right. This is not right. So I broke off the engagement, ended up going on my mission, which I was planning to do ever since I was little anyway. So went on my mission, and then while I was on my mission, I Dear John'd him. Another whole experience, but ended up Dear Johnning him. And Peter was on a mission at the same time, and his girlfriend Dear John'd him on his mission. So we didn't know each other, had no idea. We lived in the same city in Georgia, but didn't know anything about each other. And we came home within 2 weeks of each other from our missions, and we had both lost our significant others. We were set up, and we ended up getting married. And so it was very, very hard for me, that whole experience, though, of not knowing why, but knowing that it wasn't right, and then looking back and seeing that it led us to our family. It led us to the person we were supposed to marry. So that was just a huge confirmation to me that the Lord, if we follow the promptings, if we do follow the Spirit, like these prophets testify of, like God knows all things. We don't. We cannot see the full picture, but He will guide us through to where we need to go if we will listen and obey. So that was just a testimony builder of that. So with that, think about something, like Peter said, something in your life that you have seen, that you've obeyed the Spirit and seen blessings. I mean, sometimes we don't see the blessings, I know, in this life. We don't see the end point in this life, as they didn't see. They didn't see the end of the Book of Mormon. But what have you seen in your life that you have seen has come from a result of you obeying the Spirit or following a prompting or something when you didn't know why?
Jacob chapter 6 verse 7, oh be wise, what can I say more? I love that, because when we are given that command to be wise, when Laura was going through this experience, it wasn't necessarily her relying on her own wisdom. It was her relying,
opposite of my wisdom.
It was her relying on
completely.
God's wisdom, who knows all things.
Yeah.
And I asked Laura to share this story because I think that we can all think of our lives when we followed a directive that we didn't know the end. We didn't know what was to come from that. I just recently, I'm putting her on the spot, but Sister Anna Adams, she had a prompting. She had a bit of wisdom that came from God, where she decided she was going to cancel her Netflix subscription and was going to subscribe to the Living Scriptures. And for her, there might be worldly wisdom that could say, like, you don't need to do that, Anna. There's good things, there's uplifting things. You don't. There might be worldly wisdom that can come in, but for her, she received this prompting, which came from on high. This came from God, and she's acting on that. And so I want to give her a little bit of encouragement of just saying, always follow your promptings, because when you follow your promptings, you're relying on the source of all wisdom, and that is God, who is all things are before Him.
He knows all things from the beginning to the end.
The past, the future, the present are all before Him. And so I think that it is so important, like Laura's example, like Nephi, like Mormon, that when we have a feeling to do something, that it is not us relying on ourselves. It is us relying on a higher wisdom. That is the wisdom of God. And so we're going to end this video. So